Hi friends, it's Vanessa
and Kaylee,
and we're back with The Struggle is Real.
Because we know the struggle to talk about mental health and be mentally healthy is real. So a few weeks ago we talked about fancy things like confirmation bias and cognitive lenses, and these were all just really fancy ways of saying that we all see the world a little bit differently, and the way that we see the world, or the lens through which we see the world, can really shape how we think and feel and behave. And if we get stuck in a certain lens, if we get stuck in a certain way of seeing the world, we can start being really mean to ourselves, and this can lead to some really big mental health problems.
Today we want to talk about a lens that acts as this protective shield against, ourselves, unfortunately, and how crappy we can be to ourselves. And what this protective shield is called is self-compassion, and it has a really big impact on our mental health.
Exactly, because it challenges these crappy thoughts we have and turns them into much nicer ones. So our goal for today's video is to help you develop some self-compassion.
And you might be thinking, what the heck is that? Or maybe you already have some beliefs about self-compassion, but we're here to set the record straight. Self-compassion is basically taking all that kindness, caring, concern that you direct to all the people in your life and directing it to yourself instead. That's it. Very simple.
That's it. It's the opposite of the golden rule. Instead of treating people how you want to be treated, treat yourself how you treat other people. A great example of this is, imagine a friend came to you and they were super upset because they tried really hard, they worked their butt off, but they got a really bad mark on an exam. Some things you probably would say to them are, you tried really hard, you'll do better next time, I know you're super smart, it must have just been a really hard exam, maybe you can go talk to the prof, maybe, you'd offer some solutions to their problem. But now turn it around and imagine that you studied really hard and you worked your butt off, but you got a really bad mark on an exam. You would not say all those nice things to yourself. Maybe you would. In that case, high five. We don't believe you though.
Especially, you just failed an exam. You might be stuck in one of those really negative, sad lenses, and we know that you're going to have kind of negative, sad thoughts.
Exactly. So you're probably saying things like, you're such an idiot, you're going to get kicked out of school, you're going to end up a troll living under a bridge, your whole family's going to disown you, your life is over, basically. The big problem with this is that most people tend to think this is just a normal thing that we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be mean to ourselves. We're supposed to tell ourselves we're idiots sometimes. That's just what everyone does. What's the problem? The problem is that you're really smart and really convincing. So if you keep telling yourself that you're a really big idiot and that you're really stupid or that you're unlovable or that no one's ever going to want to date you or all these things, if you keep saying that, eventually you're going to believe yourself. So now that we've convinced you not to be really big jerk to yourself, there's some things you need to know about how to be more self-compassionate. There's this really awesome researcher named Kristen Neff, and I'm a pretty big fan of hers.
The best.
And she developed this model of self-compassion, and she's identified the 3 most important things you need to do or need to have to be a more self-compassionate person.
Because we know you guys like to know a lot about things to understand them before you're actually going to use them.
Yeah.
Because you're smart.
Yeah, and we know you like lists. So here's a list. Here's 3 things.
The first is self-kindness, which is pretty self-explanatory. Instead of being mean to yourself, you be kind to yourself. Instead of saying horrible things that you would never say to family, friends, or even a stranger, you replace that for really nice, kind thoughts. The second one is common humanity. When we're faced with a rejection or a failure or just anything bad happens in our life, we tend to think that it only happens to us or we're the only person who's ever messed up in the history since the dawn of time.
Since the dawn of time!
But humans are imperfect, we live imperfect lives, we all mess up, we all feel pain. And so really connecting with that, knowing that your experience isn't just you and you're isolated and no one can understand, actually starts to make you feel better about it.
So if you make a big mistake, it might be common for you to think I'm such a loser, everyone's gonna think I'm just the absolute worst, I'm the stupidest person.
Yeah.
But if you can try and think back and remember that everyone makes mistakes. Joe from mailing actually just made the exact same mistake 2 weeks ago, and Sally over, Secretary Sally, she did the exact same thing. It helps you to realize oh, right, I'm not actually horrible, I'm just human.
We all just do these things.
Exactly.
The third one is mindfulness.
Vanessa's favorite thing in the entire world.
This is the greatest thing that's ever existed. I'm so happy it's part of the model. Mindfulness is being present in the moment that you are in and just staying with the feeling that you're having, whether it be feeling rejected or feeling like you messed up and feeling just terrible and crappy. Because you really wanted to take notice of the awful things that you're saying to yourself and embrace that instead of running away and putting it in a box and locking it up and dumping it in the ocean. Just stay with your pain and know that it's normal. You're having these thoughts that are really mean and that you can change those thoughts. Staying with your experience isn't going to ruin you.
Exactly. The only way to do those first two things that we talked about is to take time to use some mindfulness to realize what you're saying to yourself.
Alright, so there might be people in the peanut gallery right now being like, boo! It's not real, I don't believe in it, give me some facts.
Yeah, don't be nice to yourself, that's stupid.
No. Where in science does it tell us that that's the right thing to do? Well, science does tell us this.
Lucky for you guys, we both have masters of science. We are masters of science.
So we can find it really easy. We got the science hookups.
The inside scoop on the science.
Should we say science again?
So the first scientific evidence that this is a thing you should actually take time to do is that people with more self-compassion just have better lives. They are happier, they have less depression, they have less anxiety, they just overall have less mental health problems than people who don't do this. And we know you're competitive. We know that you want to win this challenge. So if you practice some more self-compassion, you'll be able to, make some progress, get up to where they are.
And you might think those people probably just and nothing bad has ever happened to them in their entire lives. But that's not true. What we know about self-compassion is that it helps buffer these negative events. It's almost like this shield, so that, something bad happens to you and it doesn't automatically make you depressed and your life horrible. It's you have this shield in the middle and it blocks all of that crappy stuff. A really cool thing about self-compassion is that it actually reduces those stress hormones that come into our body when we're in the fight or flight system. And these hormones are pretty stressful on our body, and we don't want to have them in our body all the time. What self-compassion does is it releases the opposite of that hormone, and it calms you down, it makes you feel happy and connected with people, and just overall just makes you happy. It's like a warm hug of a hormone.
So if you're a university student or a college student or you've moved away for some reason, these same things that we're talking about can really apply to a lot of those common horrible experiences that come along with that. So it's really common for people who've moved away for a job or for school to experience a lot of homesickness and temporary depression or anxiety, just feeling really crappy and really questioning whether or not you made the right choice. Having some self-compassion can really beat down those really intense stress hormones and allow you to just be a lot nicer to yourself and make that experience a little more easy.
Alright, we know that some of you, I don't know who, might still be skeptical. But we like that about you. Fight the mad, be skeptical, don't believe everything you hear.
So for example, you might be thinking some things like, oh, I can't just be nice to myself all the time and just tell myself nice things and pretend that nothing is bad and just, think that life is just sunshine and rainbows all the time. We're not actually asking you to do that.
That's not what self-compassion is.
No, not at all. But we understand that you might be thinking that or questioning that. So what we want you to know is that self-compassion still involves evaluating yourself and still thinking about things that have happened. It just means that you're not going to add an extra layer of crap to your life by telling yourself that you're a big idiot. So we're not saying that you should just pretend that the bad thing that happened is okay and it's perfect, everything's going to be fine. We're just saying that there's a way to think about it that doesn't involve being super mean to yourself.
Another thing you might be thinking is, Kaylee and Vanessa, I can't be self-compassionate. How am I going to be motivated? It's going to turn me into a lazy loser. I'm going to let myself off the hook. I'm never going to get anything done. I'm just going to sit on the couch all day and eat Cheetos.
Exactly. The only way I get up for work in the morning is by telling myself I'm a big piece of crap.
Yeah, what is that? That's messed up, man. That's messed up.
You need to check yourself.
You do. Research shows that being compassionate to yourself actually increases people's motivations.
So imagine if you were a kid at school again, channel back to those days, and imagine your teacher gave you back a test and you did super crappy. And imagine the little comment bubble in the top, those red pens I used to always write. Imagine the comment said you're a big idiot. You did a real bad job on this. You're gonna have to repeat this whole grade because you suck. I'm gonna tell everyone you know that you're a big idiot.
I feel the tears coming.
It's really intense. Now imagine you got that test back in the red ink on the top. It said, wasn't your best work. Let's meet after school. We can discuss this. We'll figure out ways you can do better next time. Which one of those two scenarios motivates you more to do better next time? Probably the second one. And the second one is still acknowledging a bad thing happened, you didn't do a good job, but you're just not adding that layer of telling yourself you're crappy. And it's just thinking forward to okay, how can we fix this? And finally, you might be telling yourself I'm a tough man. I don't need self-compassion. That's for girls. That's for little babies. I don't need to be nice to myself. I'm tough. Well, that's stupid. I'm sorry, but it is. Everybody needs a little bit of self-compassion from time to time, and we're taught by society that if we need that, then we're weak, or there's something wrong with us, or we're losers.
And can we just talk about how messed up that is? Why is it like this? And we know from many of our discussions is that we have those exact same phrases for everything to do with mental health. But being vulnerable and having the courage to talk about your mental health struggles and talk about these things takes a lot of courage and strength. And so being nice to yourself also shows incredible strength.
Exactly. And a little secret we have for you is that you just don't have to tell anyone you're doing this. No one has to know.
It can be your own secret that you're being nice to yourself.
Yeah, we won't tell anybody.
P.S. How messed up is that?
Alright, so we basically convinced you that self-compassion is like the bee's knees, right?
Of course.
We knew it. Here are some ways that you can actually be a more self-compassionate person. Because I know now you're getting a little nervous because you're like, okay, I gotta do this, but how?
I don't know how to do it.
We got you. Here you go.
The first thing you can do, which is like a really easy step, is just watch your language, Sonny. And what we mean is pay attention and see when you're being mean to yourself. What are the sort of things you're saying to yourself? And would you say those to a friend or a family member? Probably not.
Once you've been able to pay a bit more attention to the language you're using when you're talking to yourself, is you can try and have some really specific phrases you can use in specific situations. So it might be difficult for the first few times, but if you can have a specific set of phrases that you can tell yourself that are very compassionate and just much nicer to yourself, then it's going to make this a lot easier.
And the first thing you can do is pay attention to the nice things that other people say about you. Because you might like start with your little list and you'd be like, well, there's nothing nice to say about me. But I'm sure your mom, your best friend, and you can imagine what your dog might say about you.
Yes.
You can use those to start off. And then maybe once you look at those, you can think of your own. The third thing you can do is meditation. So mindfulness meditation, we talked about it being part of that component, or loving kindness meditation, or self-compassion meditation.
Just Google these things.
Exactly. You put anything, you're gonna get a million results. And you can follow videos or podcasts or little sound clips, and this can help you brainstorm to be a nicer person to yourself, and they're really, really great.
They're basically just walking you through ways to think nice thoughts about yourself instead of really mean ones.
Isn't that messed up that we need that?
And the last helpful tip that we have for you on how to be a more self-compassionate person is a thing called self-compassion letters. And this sounds kind of corny and kind of cheesy, but stick with us.
And hopefully you don't remember what a letter is. I don't know, do you?
It's been a long time since I've used a pen.
It's on paper.
So a self-compassion letter is basically just sitting down to write a letter to yourself in a way that's a lot nicer than probably some of the crummy thoughts you've been having. And a really easy way to do this is pretend you're writing a letter to a friend. So think of the crappy thing that happened and pretend it happened to a friend instead of happening to you. And just write a letter of all the things you would say to that friend and all the ways you would approach that with that friend. And now when you've written that letter, you can go back and read it and realize that those are all the things you should be saying to yourself.
And you can also Google self-compassion letter, because there's lots of instructions. If you watch this and you're still stuck and you forget, you can get some help on the internet.
So your challenge for this week? Is to, well, you guessed it, be more self-compassionate.
Who would have known?
Who would have known? So the first thing we want you to do is, like Vanessa was saying, pay attention to what you're saying to yourself. Stop and think. Use some of that mindfulness stuff that we're sure you're super good at now because you've been watching all of our videos. Use some mindfulness and really think about what you're telling yourself when a bad thing happens. So once you start to experience negative emotion, think about what you're saying to yourself. And just be aware of all those negative, crappy thoughts you have.
And then cultivate some self-compassion. Try being nice to yourself.
Exactly. So if you're saying things like, you're such a loser, no one's gonna ever want to date you, you're gonna drop out of school because you're gonna get kicked out, all these different things, pretend your best friend was with you. And what would they say to you instead? And try and think those things instead.
And as always, fake it till you make it. You gotta practice a lot. You gotta do these things a lot to make them actually part of your toolbox of things you can do.
Alright, well thanks for sticking with us for another video. We know the struggle to talk about mental health and be mentally healthy is real.
But hopefully after this, it's a little bit easier.
Damn it, you messed me up with the cool. Let me start again.
Too cool for school.
Too cool for this.
That's why I was all messed up. How can you get something that cool out without messing it up?
Okay.
This is a fun one. We're having a fun time.
Perfect. That's it. Alright, so challenge.
Don't put